Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday. This is another edition of Pagan Problems, and this week's topic is a bit on the sensitive side. It has to do with the role of priesthood and administering funeral rites. I know none of us will really like to think about this, but death is a doorway, and it's one we all go through eventually. It's been said that the only certainties in life are death and taxes. Well, taxes create anger, but death creates fear. There are a lot of different ideas about what composes the afterlife, what it consists of, but ultimately what we believe is a matter of faith. What we do know for a fact is that at some point, all of us will shed our mortal coil. And when that time comes, it's customary for funerals, wakes, some sort of ceremony to take place. This is about the survivors confronting the reality of death, laying to rest the person who has departed, accepting what has happened, and getting some form of closure. Now, to be Wiccan means that you have taken on the mantle of priesthood, and anyone who becomes a priest or a priestess, they accept certain responsibility, and officiating these major rites of passage and life events, or in this case, death events, it's really amongst them. For example, birth blessings, when new babies are introduced to the rest of their community, coming of age rituals, which might take place anytime from the early teens or when someone graduates high school or attains their legal majority. Initiations, this is for when someone formally joins a coven and becomes a full-fledged member. We have hand fastings, which are pagan weddings, hand partings, which is the ritual aspect of pagan divorce. We have croning and sagings once people feel that they have attained a certain transition in their lives. And then, of course, we have funeral rites. Now, because so many of us are solitaries, it isn't always part of our spiritual routine to fulfill the aforementioned duties. So we can be caught off guard if suddenly we're asked to perform one of these rites. It comes up. It's especially difficult when it comes to conducting a funeral. It's such an emotional time. It's even worse if we know the person who passed through the veil. So it's a good idea to be prepared, or at least have a general outline ready to go if the situation arises. And of course, when it does, we can adjust that outline to make allowances for that particular person and the situation and everything else. But it's good to at least have a baseline of preparation so you're not having to figure it all out in the moment. And of course, during the Samhain season, we are acknowledging physical mortality. So this is a fitting moment to review how we might go about performing a solemn rite such as a pagan funeral. I have had to do this. In 2018, my grandfather passed away, and he was on the Jehovah's Witness side of the family. I heard about his death secondhand and after his funeral had already taken place. So I decided to do a graveside service. This was both for my own sake and for the sake of my cousin, who had also left the religion. We had both been excluded from the funeral. No one from the family, apart from her, had even told me that he had died. So you can imagine what kind of time that was really like for us. Now, it was difficult for obvious reasons to have to be the one who actually did a graveside service for him, but it had to be done. I'm glad that I did it. It was a comfort to have a ceremony. I did give my cousin and I some sense of closure. And if you're in a similar situation or you can't make it to a family funeral for whatever reason, remember you can always have a private graveside remembrance later on. You do retain that right. I don't think anyone has the right to decree that because of religious disparities or any other reason really that somehow you aren't entitled to have a ceremony and to mourn a passing and to acknowledge the loss. I just don't think anyone has the right to forbid that. And of course, when we don't have anyone else to call upon, we have to call upon ourselves. If I had had the choice, I would much rather have gotten this experience of doing a funeral for someone to whom I did not have an emotional attachment, but that wasn't the way it worked out. And quite frankly, my cousin was never going to be up to doing it herself. So it fell to me. I was the oldest, I was an experienced practitioner, and as the moment I dedicated myself as a Wiccan, I had taken on that responsibility if it ever came up. So it was done. And I did have to figure it out in the moment, which is why I'm bringing up now so that no one else has to find themselves in that situation. So let's talk about the basic structure for a pagan funeral rite. Now, of course, everything can be altered, it can be adjusted, it can be personalized. This is just kind of the basic outline to keep in mind. First, you'll need your usual altar tools and supplies for the ritual. Nothing really changes there. And then you begin with cleansing the area, and I suggest calling upon all four elements and making sure to also cleanse yourself with anointing oil. Uh, Not only because I think that's a good practice generally, but also because of the nature of what you're doing, and particularly if you're doing a graveside service, you don't want to attract undue attention. You don't want any energies coming home with you later. So it's best just to take precautions. After that, you welcome the attendees into the circle. You cast the circle and call the quarters, beginning in the west. Now, the reason why I suggest this is because you are saying farewell to the departed. The west is the gateway to the other world, so this is one of the rare occasions in which you are working in a Widdershins or counterclockwise motion. Then offer a prayer to the god and the goddess, or any other deities that the deceased worked with, or that was specific to your own pagan community. This is where you do have to make some adjustments as the situation requires. Next, say a blessing for the deceased during this time of transition from flesh to spirit. I think this is particularly important depending on the beliefs of the deceased. For example, in the Jehovah's Witness religion, they don't believe that any form of consciousness survives death. So for my grandfather to pass through the veil and realize that he's still him, he's still conscious, he's still aware, he's still interacting with the world to a certain extent, I imagine that was extremely unsettling and came as quite a shock. So easing that transition, particularly if someone really doesn't believe there's anything afterwards, I think that's an important duty to perform. Then you have the eulogy. This is a brief biography of the deceased's lives. You highlight surviving members of their family, and also you make mention of things that were important to them in life, what their spiritual persuasion was, what their profession was, if that was really important to them, any charitable works they were engaged in, hobbies that they were really known for, things of that kind. And then you end the eulogy with the date of the death and how old the person was at the time of their death. And then you go into the memory sharing phase of things. It is a graceful thing to invite people to speak if they feel up to it. Obviously, not everyone will, but it's good to allow people the opportunity to share memories and their thoughts and their feelings. It's an important part of the grieving process and for people getting some closure. And when you're officiating, you need to make sure that people have the space and the time to do this. After that, what I did was I had a song/chant. I used one of the variants of We All Come From the Goddess. I thought it was a very good and fitting choice. It seemed to work well, but you have a lot of options to choose from. And of course, if you don't want to sing or do a chant, if someone perhaps has a poem that they would like to recite it, things of this kind, this would really be the moment for it. So when you're starting to bring everything down to a close. After this section, then you say a last goodbye to the deceased. Wishing them the best of luck as they go into the other world, reaffirming any love and affection, things of that nature. After that, you thank the Lord and the Lady and any other deities you invited into the circle for their presence, and you say farewell to them. Then you dismiss the quarters, and then after that, you declare that the circle is open, and you thank everyone for coming. Now, it sounds kind of straightforward when you put it like that. Of course, when the time comes to perform it, the energy is quite different. One last thing I would suggest is that if you do find yourself in a position of having to officiate a pagan funeral, make sure you rehearse at least a couple of times so that when you're in that moment, you're not really fighting your nerves as much, you're not stumbling over your words as often. It allows everything to go more smoothly. It's already a difficult time. You want to make sure that you're on your A game as much as you possibly can be, so you're not making anything difficult. You're not adding and projecting your own issues onto the situation. It is a time to really put on that mantle of priesthood, and remember, you are there to do a job and to make sure that you do that job with grace and dignity. So that's what I have to say about conducting pagan funerals. If you have ever had to do that yourself, please. I would love to hear about your experiences. This is a very difficult thing. Not all of us have had to deal with this. I think it'd be good to come together as a community and talk about how it's done, how we felt, what we felt went well, what didn't go so well, all that sort of thing. And if you'd like to do that, please join us at Blackbird's Brew on Discord. There will be a link to join in the description box below. And of course, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe this video. But that's it for now. I'll see you in another video. Bye.